Hey there, everybody. Matt Carter here.
And Jessica Carter from CarterMatt.com.
This is your Blue Blood Season 10, Episode 7 reaction, and in this video, we will tell you about an episode entitled Higher Standards, which is kind of, I think, what we've had for Danny Reagan after most of last season, and I don't know if we're really there with Danny at the moment yet still, but I have some interesting takes on this episode because I feel like it is, at least in part, one of the better episodes of the season. I think the Jamie part of it's really good. I think the Aaron part of it is really good. And we actually had some Henry Reagan.
Yes, which for me was the best part of the episode.
Yeah.
Which I'll get to before we jump into everything else.
All right. Well, before we do, if you do enjoy this video, which includes a discussion as well about Episode 8, that is coming on CBS next week. If you like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other updates. All right.
So I wanted to start with that scene with Danny and Henry talking about dementia and Alzheimer's and these diseases that affect some of us as we get older. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Blue Bloods for touching on this subject because there's not a lot of shows that do. And as someone who has a grandmother who just turned 91, so happy birthday, Grandma, she has had Alzheimer's for 10 years, over 10 years now. And I remember growing up that one of the things that she was always very afraid of was getting one of these two diseases and losing her memories, that her family and her memories are the most important thing in her life. So when it started to come, it was something that was really devastating for the family because we knew how she felt. She was very vocal about how she felt. So having that conversation with Danny and Henry, I feel was very important for a lot of us out there because there's a lot of us out there that have family members that are battling this or have gone through this and have lost people that have succumbed to this, and it's very difficult. So I just wanted to send that out there to Blue Bloods to say thank you, and to anyone else out there that's gone through something like this or has someone that they love. There's other people out there like me that know what you're going through. It's very heartbreaking. It's why that scene at the end where we had Danny taking Henry out to the trivia night, and Henry's like, bam, bam, bam. It was obvious what was happening. Henry knew what was happening because he's still sharp, and it was cool that he called Danny out on it, but that it was, well, is it working? Yeah, it's working. So it was great. I really loved that. For me, that was the whole meat of the episode.
Well, I think the real purpose of this storyline, at least to me, is that Blue Bloods, I think as a show, they try to focus on things that are universal. They don't really tend to get political. And I think, understandably, given this climate right now, I think we are in this sort of era where everyone wants to tell stories that are deemed a lot towards specific things that are topical. And Blue Bloods does this from time to time. But I think issues like dementia and growing older, the structure of this show enables it so that these things can be brought up. And they also kind of know it's unfortunately timeless in a way, so that families 10 years from now, 15 years from now can still watch this episode and still kind of relate to some of what is being said in there. But I also like that it was, in the end, you had a positive note at the end of the episode with Henry. It wasn't just about sadness. It was about, here is Henry, who is still sharp as a tack and able to interrupt people and get the right answers at trivia night. And I think that went a long way, and I think that, to me, with Danny, was more meaningful than anything that was in the case for Danny in this episode.
Yeah, it was a bit more of an interesting case, but yeah, for me, the meat of the episode for Danny wasn't anything to do with the case. Even though it was a good case, it was a better case than some of the other ones. He's gotten very clever of how he was able to get this person who was doing these horrible things to elderly people and hitting them and beating them and robbing them, that he was able to get a confession, and it was very, very smart. But that stuff with Henry was all the Danny stuff I needed in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, clever Danny is one of my favorite sides of Danny, and I think he provided that to a certain extent within the framework of this episode, while also giving us sort of the Henry stuff and also a little bit of conflict between Danny and Aaron sort of mixed in there. And that's a good transition into Aaron, because I actually feel like this may be Aaron's best season on Blue Bloods in at least a few years. I don't know if it's...
Yeah, I agree. She's been getting some really good storylines, and yeah, it's been a really good Aaron season.
Yeah, and I mean, I say this as someone who has been critical of the Aaron stories in the past, and I felt like at times they were the weak links in a lot of episodes.
Maybe they've heard you.
Maybe they've heard me. Maybe they just brought on some writers who are really, in love with the Aaron character, or whatever it may be. I think it's just that Bridget Moynihan has done a lot with the material that she's been given this time, and I think a part of it is just probably they have sort of moved her up the ranks a little bit these past couple seasons, and as Spider-Man has taught me, with great power comes great responsibility, and here she had a lot more responsibility, and this is the downside of it, is that occasionally you put away someone who did not deserve to be put away, and you have to have someone like Jack come in and sort of help to figure things out.
And that was an interesting thing she said, is about her job, that while she likes her job, it also really sucks. It's very hard and very difficult, because she's making decisions for people's lives.
And I think the thing that was interesting about it too was you had this scene, with Danny and Aaron and everyone at family dinner sort of talking about this notion of, when cops get in trouble, there's a very obvious punishment system, but what happens to DAs when they get in trouble?
Yeah.
I think we learned it really, it just all kind of stays in with them. They just internalize it. They kind of have to process and deal with it in that sort of way. So I think there is a punishment, and a part of that punishment is having to look these people in the eye. And with cops, you put them wherever you're going to put them, and then at that point, they're sort of a little bit more distant from the case.
Yeah.
And, attorneys, they just have to face this stuff a little bit more head on. So I think that moment with her and the man she locked away but was able to eventually free and apologize, that was sort of at least the powerful moment of this episode.
Yeah, it was very powerful, especially the way that it was written for her and the way that she played it, to understand that there is no, even though he forgave her, there was no amount of sorries, and how little it felt saying I'm sorry, because she was responsible for, or partially responsible for, taking away those years of his life. He can't get that back. This whole episode felt like it was all about loss of time, and for people that have dementia or have Alzheimer's, or this man who's been locked away.
I also just really, I will say this. Anthony bringing her wheatgrass, probably the funniest moment of the entire episode.
I love their friendship. I love it. Erin's very intense, and she does carry a lot of weight on her shoulders. So having moments where we get to see her away from work as she's running, she's got her friendship, he's bringing her wheatgrass, have a little smile, like, it's just nice.
If I was Aaron, I would have grabbed that espresso out of Anthony's hand and drank that instead and just said, here you go, buddy, have fun. Like, really? I guess Aaron likes it, but after working with somebody for so long, you probably know you're not going to give someone wheatgrass willy-nilly for no real reason. Yeah. But for Jamie in this episode, this is where the title, I guess, of Higher Standards comes into play. Yeah. I think the question I have to ask is it out of character for Jamie to throw water on the guy before arresting him? It didn't feel fully like Jamie to me.
No, it didn't.
And that's a problem, obviously, because that's the basis of this whole storyline.
Yeah, and I understand that they had to have something that, I guess, not was to feel out of character for him, but just there had to be something for them to have that fight about, that Jamie stepped in and made a decision that Frank, of course, was not going to agree with, because Frank always has to get into some sort of problem with one of his children or somebody in each episode where there's a disagreement. But yes, it felt pretty out of character for him to do something like that. I get he was mad though, and
Yeah.
to be fair, we've all been mad and we've all said and done things that we don't mean,
It's true, and I think
that are out of character for us.
and maybe that is the situation. Maybe he just lost his temper. Maybe it is he's still kind of being used to being the boss, and when you do kind of get handed that leadership role, sometimes you do things that are a little bit weird. When I was drum major of my high school marching band, I understand not anywhere near the same amount of responsibility. I did ridiculous things sometimes because I felt like I had like some sort of actual power, which I did not have for like 99% of my high school experience. So these sort of moments, I guess they do come out. It didn't feel like it was in character for Jamie.
It just felt like he, in some ways, he was out of control because the situation was out of control. And that feeling that, you know, two cops are going to be thrown water on them, which is a form of assault. You can't do that to people. To then go back and do the same thing, to be like, oh, well, it's okay for you, but it's not okay for us, kind of thing. I think he forgets that he's a sergeant and that he can't do those things. And for that moment, it almost felt like he was just Jamie, who's got these two guys that are part of his family, and and somebody did something to them. So he was like, oh, you're going to throw water on my brothers? Well, now I'm going to come and throw water on you. And not really just remembering that he's not a civilian.
I think that's a part of it. I think it's just also that I think he was probably thinking in terms of, I am the sergeant, I am, looking after these cops. Yep. In doing this, these cops will feel like I have their back and they're going to want to support me after this move happens. I think for me, the part of it that surprised me on some level was Jamie sort of acting surprised that he was getting written up by Frank after the fact. I mean, I think it would have been totally cool if he went in there and was like, yeah, I know I screwed up. I know I shouldn't have done this sort of thing. I should have just arrested him. I think Jamie's usually calm and cool and collected enough to realize that after the fact, and he didn't necessarily have to have Frank sort of tell him, but I guess he was still kind of heated in the moment even after the fact.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not surprised that Frank made that decision, because Frank is not just the guy in charge. He's his dad. So he does have to, as the titles say, hold him to a higher standard. He can't be more lenient on someone who's not only a cop, but is also, his kid.
Yeah, I think he has to do ultimately whatever he has to do. If he didn't, if he wouldn't want to be in this situation, he needs to not be commissioner. And because his kids are cops and he's still commissioner, he has to deal with this when his kids screw up. Jamie at least screwed up in terms of what a cop should or should not do, even though you had sort of that moment at the end of this episode where I think Frank sort of realized that he probably would have done the same thing.
He might have, but like he said, and it's true, it was a different time and it was a different climate.
Yeah.
And while I get where Jamie's coming from, oh yeah, well, sometimes you need to shake up the climate. Not always the case.
Yeah,
it's all very situational.
And I think that's true. I mean, I think I wouldn't be surprised really if any Reagan was in that situation. Like if they had done the same thing Jamie did, it wouldn't be the biggest shocker in the known world. But I think all of them still would have had to get punishment after the fact. Yeah. I think that's sort of the universal thing about this storyline. Was kind of nice to see, Fisherman Frank back out there. Which, by the way, Frank getting up at 4 a.m. to go fishing. That is a lot of commitment to the craft that I do not possess. I mean, maybe he's just, I don't know what time he gets up to be commissioner, but I guess he's kind of used to it. But let's sort of, as we wrap things up, preview where we are going entering episode 8. Yep. Because Dylan Walsh is coming on board as the mayor, and this is sort of the stuff that was teased in the promo for what is coming up next. Blue Bloods has a storied history of mayors appearing on the show. Yep. You had Lorraine Bracco. Yep. You had Mayor John Diggle, and I refuse to call him anything other than that at this point. You've had a number of mayors, and I think ultimately
though be Diggle forever.
Well, yeah, I know he was good on Dexter too. David Ramsey, I'm sorry for just typecasting you as Diggle, but
when you have an iconic role, it's hard to get out of it. It's like
Yeah.
Chandler Bing is Chandler Bing
Yeah, just
forever.
embrace it, David Ramsey. You're filming the Arrow finale right now. It's all okay. But, yeah, this mayor... Usually the mayor stories are really connected to Frank. This one actually feels like it's connected to Erin because he wants her to run for district attorney. He wants to make this happen. But what does he want in return? I feel like he wants her to sort of enact whatever his agenda is. Is Erin going to be okay being sort of under the thumb of this guy? And to me, I don't think she would go for this.
I don't think so.
I think she would think about it, but I do think Erin will be district attorney before Blue Bloods is over, provided we get like an 11th or 12th season.
But I think she's going to be able to make it happen on her own terms.
Yeah, I don't think she really needs to rush this. I don't think it's something that she really needs to make happen. But also, Henry is going to have another big story. This is like 2 big weeks in a row for Henry.
That's great. I love him.
I don't know when this happens. This is really, really rare. But Henry's going to be working as an investigative consultant for Child Services.
Yep.
And he and Danny are going to get into some arguments involving a case that has to do with the man who's being hostile towards his wife. And... maybe this is a standard Blue Bloods conflict. It's just going to be interesting because we're coming out of tonight where you have this warm, fuzzy moment with with Henry and Danny.
Yep.
And then you're just sort of flipping that entirely on its head, and now you're going to see the two of them fight.
Which is kind of cool about this show because they are family, and that's how family works. 1 minute you're okay, the next minute you're not okay. It is what it is. It's all still family, though, so...
Yeah, I'm glad that
I'm sure they'll come out of it at the end all right.
Yeah, they almost always do, and I'm sure it's just going to be nice to see some sort of, like, Henry getting to flex some muscles that he probably has not used in a really, really long time.
Yep.
Like, ultimately. But as we wrap this video up, we want to know from you guys, what did you think about Blue Blood Season 10, Episode 7, and also... what do you want to see moving into Episode 8? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and also give us a like, subscribe, and you can support us further by checking the link in the description to the Carter Matt store, and we'll see you here next time.